Greetings and welcome back to Gadfly Academy. Today we begin our book study of Paul Kingsnorth's Against the Machine on the Unmaking of Humanity in Earnest. I'm really pleased to have you join us. Today I'll offer a few reflections on the introduction as well as on chapters 1 and 2. I'll begin with a quote from the introduction. Meanwhile, out in what is fondly called the real world, quote unquote, by people who often don't know very much about reality, you are living in a metastasizing machine which is closing in around you, polluting your skies, in your woods, in your past, in your imagination. It's a modern conceit that those who live according to the dictates of modern society are the ones living in the quote unquote real world, while everyone else, the monks, the religious, the poets, the artists, are living in a dream world, a utopia. Ironically, the opposite is actually true. Like Kingsnorth, and likely most of you, I've always felt ill at ease in the modern world, repelled by, among other things, its isolating tendencies, wasteful consumerism, shallowness, and lack of roots. We have lived our matrix-like existence either unaware what was going on or unable to act differently. We have pretended that we could coexist with the machine and that there wouldn't be a price to pay. The reality, however, is that we were always paying a price for our luxuries, our conveniences, our efficiencies. These were hidden costs that don't show up in our spreadsheets, perhaps, but very real nonetheless. The truth is that the real world exists outside of our spreadsheets, and that the path forward is one for which we don't have precise maps. Kingsnorth begins his book with a quote from Wendell Berry that, in a sense, summarizes the entire book. Here's the quote. It is easy for me to imagine that the next great division of the world will be between people who wish to live as creatures and people who wish to live as machines. End quote. As Kingsnorth notes, Berry wrote this 20 plus years ago, and society has not ceased to continue on this trajectory. The reality is that this is the direction society is headed, and unless we make different decisions, we can expect the same outcomes, and worse. We are, like the proverbial frog in the kettle, being boiled to death. My hope is that Kingsnorth's book will inspire and encourage people to realize that, for a variety of reasons, we cannot continue to live our lives according to the order, structure, and dictates of modern, quote-unquote, developed culture. For a long time, returning to the land has been one of a myriad of lifestyle choices one could make. Increasingly, this may become more of an imperative than simply an option. Most of us in the West have lived with the luxury belief that each of us could and should make lifestyle choices according to our own personal whims. This is one of the many modern lies resulting from our underlying confusion about what it means to be a human. These kinds of lifestyle choices are only possible in the completely unreal world that we find ourselves in. Moving forward, there will be an increasing cost of choosing any particular path. There will come a time, likely sooner than we expect, where we will have to decide whether following our particular lifestyle choice is worth the cost to freedom of conscience, personal autonomy, and so on. The real world is, at very least, the natural world that sustains us, and if we hope to find inner peace as well as an actually sustainable existence, we would do well to rediscover the gift that is the actually real world. Here's another quote from the introduction. Most of the things you like are fading away. The great forests and the stories made in and by them, the strange cultures spanning centuries of time, the little pubs and the curious uninhabited places, the thrumming temples and dark marshlands and crooked villages and folk tales and conviviality and spontaneous song in old houses which might have witches in them, the possibility of dragons, the empty beaches and wild hilltops, the chance of getting lost in the rain forever, or discovering something that was never on any map, a world without maps, a world without engines. So what to do? A good place to begin is to actively rewild oneself, to cultivate love for the outdoors. As much as possible, spend free time outdoors, gardening, walking, camping, foraging. Cultivate a love for wild places and seek them out while they still exist. Free time indoors can be spent rewilding one's mind, reading the old myths and legends, deepening bonds with like-minded people who refuse to live as machines, and learning to embrace the stillness and silence that was common to most generations of humans. The modern mind, soul, and body have been shackled by the machine culture that we were born into. The only path to liberation lies in actively pushing back against it. Not a Tyler Durden-style response, but rather a quiet revolution, not inspired by lifestyle choices, but by the profound realization that our society took a wrong turn at some point. As C.S. Lewis once famously wrote nearly 100 years ago, quote, "We all want progress, but progress means getting nearer to the place where you want to be. And if you have taken a wrong turning, then to go forward does not get you any nearer. If you are on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. And in that case, the man who turns back soonest is the most progressive man. There's nothing progressive about being pig-headed and refusing to admit a mistake. And I think if you look at the present state of the world, it's pretty plain that humanity has been making some big mistake. We're on the wrong road, and if that is so, we must go back. Going back is the quickest way on." End quote. And of course, even the term progress carries with it unacceptable baggage, as I'm sure Lewis would agree. Kingsnorth begins chapter 1 with a discussion of philosophical and theological anthropology. What is a human? What does it mean to be human? What is the purpose of human life? At the heart of the modern problem are these questions. If one does not believe that humans are more than simply a machine, then there is no need to continue this conversation. If, however, one believes that humans are more than simply machines, then everything should change, and a completely different orientation to the modern world is necessary. The modern world is largely the creation of a humans as machines anthropology. In opposing this world, one needs to change one's perspective, to clarify one's value system, and to attempt to live according to these values with greater integrity. And I say this to myself first. If Kingsnorth is correct, it is not enough to simply have right, quote-unquote, anthropological ideas. True ideas that actually matter in the real world come out of an integrated way of life, which in turn is the fruit of a certain story that a culture tells itself. This is why Kingsnorth refers to Christendom and its central role in creating the West. Christendom was successful to the extent that it created a culture within which people could live according to the Christian story. Once the culture no longer lived according to the Christian story of creation, of death and resurrection and so on, there was no longer a way to preserve the vitality of the culture's ideas, anthropological, cosmological, and so on. In chapter 2, Kingsnorth addresses the problem of rootlessness. He begins an argument that he will continue in future chapters regarding the nature of colonization and how, in order for capitalism to flourish, it requires people that are not self-sufficient. It is much more difficult to sell to people who are self-sufficient, and capitalism requires consumers. Having been born into the machine of capitalism, it's hard to imagine a life that operates outside of the system. The reality, of course, is that even today, many groups do live outside of this system. And one of the ways that they are able to do this is that their communities tend to be tightly knit, and they have high degrees of self-sufficiency. These groups have a clear sense of identity and community purpose. They know who they are, where they come from, and what they're supposed to be doing. This clarity of vision comes from the clear story about themselves that they share. The story of capitalism, of course, tells a very different story. It goes something like this. You are rootless. You have come from nowhere, and you are progressing into a quote-unquote better world. And because you have no community and no roots, you require the machine to provide for your needs. As Kingsnorth said recently in a talk, the decision to put down roots where you are, even if you didn't come from there originally, is an act of rebellion. Yes, in our machine society, we have limited agency, but we do have a certain amount of control. Of course, there are consequences to deciding to put down roots, potentially less opportunities, the difficulties that come with accepting the limitations of life, a particular climate, particular people, and so on. That said, without roots, one remains at the whim of the machine, untethered from community, from nature, one's decisions ultimately being determined by the machine and its endless quest for increased power and wealth. I've often asked myself, doesn't a person have some kind of obligation to the community that raised them? From birth and until adulthood, each of us was given freely by our families and by our communities. Of course, love cannot abide compulsion. Each person must choose their home, their family, their community. But surely, for most of us at least, the strongest case is for the home, family, and community that cared for us when we were most vulnerable. For those who understand the problem, the path forward is one of small rebellious acts, such as making a commitment to a place and to the people there, and to instill a love for that place in our children. At the end of chapter 2, Kingsnorth introduces another theme that he will return to throughout the book. Our culture wars are a symptom of a rootless society that doesn't know who it is. Here's another quote from the book. When a plant is uprooted, it withers and then dies. When the same happens to a person or a people, or a planet full of both, the result is the same. Our crisis comes, I think, from our being unable to admit what on some level we know to be true, that we in the West are living inside an obsolete story. Our culture is not in danger of dying. It is already dead, and we are in denial. This, now, is the reality we have to wrestle with and transcend. End quote. Kingsnorth's argument is essentially that there can be no serious conversations about politics, cultural renewal, or a path forward until we come to terms with the meta-reality in which we find ourselves. Until we do this, we are simply rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This reframing of the cultural conversation is important and useful. It gives us an actual path forward and a sense of what is not the path forward. So that's it for today's installment. I hope you are enjoying reading Against the Machine and finding that it provides a fresh perspective for understanding modern culture and history. I'm really, really pleased to have you along for the ride, and I look forward to connecting with you moving forward as we have this conversation. Please join us on Thursday evenings at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time for our live stream on the Gadfly Academy YouTube channel. Now is a good time to subscribe if you are not already subscribed. Finally, stay tuned for Gadfly Academy and You Are Not a Machine merch in time for Christmas. I have been working behind the scenes on t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, hats, and more. The perfect gift for the tech skeptics in your life. I am getting some samples. They look great. I think you will really like them. So I'm excited to release those soon. So stay tuned. And as always, if you haven't already, please sign up for updates for our newsletter and download the How Did We Get Here reading list at the link below. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.